That morning, Eva Harper woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped softly through the gap in the curtains, just enough to signal that the day had begun. She lay still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom she had known since her teenage years. There were no incoming messages on her phone, no notifications, no greetings of any kind. Eva took a slow breath, then got out of bed without any outward emotion. It was her birthday. Eva had never expected a party or expensive gifts. She was not waiting for a surprise. What she hoped for was something simple, a normal atmosphere, a cup of coffee in the kitchen, a brief conversation, or at least a quiet happy birthday, said without tension. That hope did not feel excessive to her. Yet, for the past few years, even small expectations had often ended in disappointment. She walked to the bathroom, washed her face, and put on simple clothes. When she stepped into the kitchen, the house fell silent. Her mother was already seated at the dining table, reading something on her phone. Her father stood near the window, staring outside as if he were thinking about something important. Neither of them looked up when Eva entered. There was no smile, no greeting. Eva poured herself a cup of coffee. The sound of liquid filling the mug echoed clearly because the house was too quiet. She sat down, opened her phone, then closed it again. She knew no message would suddenly appear. The silence felt familiar, yet that morning it carried something different. It felt as if everyone was preparing for a conversation she did not want to hear. Her mother spoke first. Her tone was flat and detached. She did not mention Ava's birthday. She went straight to the subject of the future. About Ava's age, which she considered too old to still be living at home. About responsibility. About other people the same age who were already far more successful. Eva listened without interrupting. She did not lower her head, but she did not stare back either. Her face remained calm, even though her chest felt heavy. Then her father spoke. His words were brief, firm, and clearly thought out long before that morning. He said the house was not a place to stay forever. Ava was considered too comfortable, too slow to take the next step, too dependent. The final sentence sounded simple, but its impact was immediate. She was told to leave. Not tomorrow, not next week. That very day, there was no shouting, no long argument. No tears spilled at the dining table. Eva remained silent. She listened until every word was finished. She did not argue once. Not because she agreed, but because she knew that nothing she said would change their decision. Her mother took the silence as a sign of having no defense. Her father saw it as acceptance. Neither of them looked closely at Ava's face. They did not ask if she was okay. They did not ask where she would go. The conversation ended just like that, as if the decision were nothing more than part of a morning routine. Eva stood up slowly. She gave a small nod, then walked back to her room. Her steps were steady. There was no rush, no panic. She opened the closet and took out a bag that was not too large. She chose only what she needed. Not much. She knew she would not be coming back anytime soon. She also knew she did not need to take everything she owned. As she folded her clothes, her thoughts stayed calm. She remembered how long she had lived in that house. How many nights she came home late from work. How often she postponed her own needs to quietly help with things that were never openly discussed. None of it surfaced as anger. It was simply a series of facts she had kept to herself for a long time. She closed the bag and looked around the room one last time. There was no drama. No forced attachment to memories. The room was simply a space she had once occupied. She lifted her bag and walked toward the front door. Her mother stood in the living room. Her father was still by the window. Neither of them stopped her. Eva opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt fresher. The sun was already higher, signaling that the day was moving forward as usual, as if nothing had changed. She closed the door gently behind her. No one followed. No one called her name. She stood on the porch for a brief moment, then walked away. Her birthday did not begin with celebration, but with being forced out of her own home. Ava said nothing. She felt no need to explain herself. She carried no defense. She carried only herself, and the decision to keep moving forward without looking back. Eva walked away from the house with no clear destination. She simply followed the road, letting her steps decide where she would go. The bag on her shoulder felt light, but her mind was full. Not because she was confused, but because she was holding something back, making sure it did not surface at the wrong moment. A few blocks from the house, she stopped at a bus stop. She sat on the cold metal bench and stared at the street. People passed by, each absorbed in their own business. No one knew that Ava's life had just changed that morning. She took out her phone, unlocked the screen, then closed it again. There was no number she wanted to call. There was no message she wanted to send. Her parents' words were still clear in her mind. Not because they were spoken with emotion, but because they sounded too carefully planned. As if the decision had been made long ago and was only waiting for the right moment to be delivered. Her birthday was simply a coincidence they did not consider important. Ava did not feel angry. Instead, she felt empty. There was a clear difference between the two. Anger came with the urge to fight back. Emptiness came with exhaustion. And exhaustion was what she felt now. For years, she had tried to prove that she was not who they thought she was. Yet every effort was always considered not enough. The bus arrived. Ava got on and took a seat by the window. She watched the buildings pass one by one. Every corner of the city looked ordinary. There was no place that felt like home. She realized that she had lived under one roof for years without ever truly having space to be herself. She remembered the morning conversation more clearly. Her mother talked about age and comparisons, about other people's children, about standards that were never explained from the beginning. Her father spoke about responsibility in a tone that made it sound as if Ava had never done anything at all. Neither of them asked what she was dealing with. There were no questions about her job, no curiosity about how she managed her life. The most painful part was not being told to leave. What weighed on her the most was the conclusion they had made about her. That she was not independent, that she was dependent, that she was just waiting. The reality was far more complex than that, but Ava chose not to reveal any of it. She knew explanations would not change the perspective of people who had already made up their minds. The bus stopped downtown. Ava got off and walked without any specific direction. She entered a small cafe and ordered the simplest drink on the menu. She sat in a corner, opened her bag, and checked that all the important items were there. Her wallet, phone, identification. She quickly counted her money, then put it away again. Enough to survive, nothing more. Sitting there, Ava finally admitted one thing to herself. She had felt isolated in that house for a long time. She had just never dared to name it. She helped where she could. She covered gaps that were never openly discussed. She chose silence to keep things running normally. Yet that silence had allowed others to freely form one-sided judgments. She sipped her drink slowly. There were no tears. No trembling in her hands. Her reaction even surprised her. She realized that what happened that morning was not the beginning of the pain, but its peak. The wound had formed long ago. It had only now become fully visible. Her phone vibrated. A message came in from work, asking if she could take extra hours that week. Ava read it once, then replied briefly that she could. She realized her life did not stop because of someone else's decision. She still had control over her next steps. As midday approached, Ava left the cafe. She looked for a small lodging she had noticed before. The place was simple but clean. She paid for several days in advance. When she received the room key, she felt calm for the first time since morning. Not because everything was secure, but because she was finally in a place that did not judge her. In the small room, Ava sat on the edge of the bed. She opened her bag and set it on the floor. She stared at the blank wall for a moment. She let her thoughts move freely without pressure. She did not try to find a grand meaning in what had happened that day. She simply accepted that her life had just changed direction. The afternoon arrived quietly. The light from the window began to fade. Eva stood up and arranged her belongings slightly. She realized that her birthday was almost over without a single greeting. Strangely, it no longer felt important. What mattered was that she could still stand calmly without feeling defeated. She sat down again and took a deep breath. She did not know what would happen tomorrow. She did not know whether her parents would ever regret their decision. But one thing was clear to her. She would not return just to prove something. If the truth surfaced one day, it would not be because she shouted, but because facts could not be hidden forever. That night, Eva turned off the light and lay down. The second day of her new life was about to begin. She closed her eyes with one simple decision. She would keep moving forward without carrying the voices that had long doubted her. The next morning arrived quietly. Eva woke up in a small guest house room feeling calmer than the day before. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, making sure her mind was clear before starting the day. There were no new messages. No missed calls. She was not surprised. The silence felt consistent with the decision that had already been made. She got ready simply and went out to find breakfast. The streets were starting to get busy, people moving quickly toward their own activities. Eva realized that the world kept moving as usual, even though her life had just changed direction. She bought something light to eat, sat on an outdoor bench, and ate slowly. There were no racing thoughts. She focused on small things she could control. Meanwhile, in the old house, the morning unfolded differently. Her mother set the dining table as she always did. Her father prepared to leave. Eva's room remained closed. No one tried to open it. There was no conversation about what had happened the day before. To them, Eva's departure was seen as a natural consequence of a conversation that had been delayed for too long. Eva's silence was taken as an admission. There was no resistance, no argument, so they assumed the decision was right. Her father left the house feeling relieved, believing he had been firm. Her mother felt a brief sadness but reassured herself that Eva needed to learn to live independently. Neither of them questioned whether Eva was actually ready. Eva spent her day walking through different parts of the city. She took note of places that might be useful in the coming days. She asked about extra work opportunities near her workplace. She organized her schedule carefully. Everything was done without excessive emotion. She was not trying to appear strong. She was simply doing what needed to be done. In the afternoon, she received confirmation that the extra hours had been approved. She read the message twice, then put her phone away. That small step gave her a sense of security. Not because the money was large, but because she knew her effort was valued elsewhere. No one questioned her presence. No one compared her to anyone else. On the other side, the evening at her parents' house felt different. The dining table looked emptier. Eva's chair was still there, but unoccupied. Her mother noticed it while serving dinner. She paused for a moment, then continued as usual. Her father made no comment. He assumed the new routine would soon feel normal. Days passed without communication. Eva did not contact anyone in her family. Not because she wanted to teach a lesson, but because she was rebuilding her life. She knew that any words spoken now would sound like justification. She chose to wait for the right time, or perhaps not speak at all. Her parents interpreted the silence as proof that Eva had no plan. They reassured each other with the assumption that Eva would return within a few days. Her father believed the pressure would force her to learn. Her mother hoped so too, even though there was an unspoken doubt. Eva extended her stay at the guest house for a few more days. She began to adjust to the small space. She cleaned it herself, organized her belongings neatly, and maintained a routine. She woke up early, worked, then returned with a reasonable kind of fatigue. There were no judgmental questions, no atmosphere that made her feel insufficient. One evening, Eva sat alone and opened her financial records. She did not do it with emotion. She simply made sure everything was documented properly. She knew what she had done all this time. She knew where her money had gone. She did not feel the need to talk about it. Facts did not require recognition to remain true. She closed the records and put them away. There was no satisfied smile, no urge to show anything. She only wanted to make sure her steps remained steady. Silence to her was not weakness. Silence was a way to survive without hurting herself. A few days later, her mother tried to contact Eva, The call went unanswered because Eva was working. A short message followed, asking how she was doing. Eva read it after work. She did not reply immediately. She waited until evening, then answered with a brief message saying she was fine. There was no further explanation. That reply left her mother both relieved and confused. Eva sounded stable, not as they had imagined. Her father read the message and saw it as an attempt by Eva to appear strong. He remained convinced that Eva would struggle and eventually come home. Eva turned off her phone and lay down. She realized that her silence continued to be misunderstood. However, she had no intention of correcting it. Time would do its work in its own way. She was not creating distance, she was building a foundation. That day ended with one clear conclusion for Eva. She did not need to prove anything through words. The decisions she made would speak clearly through small, consistent steps. The silence others saw as weakness had become the space where she could stand more firmly. That day, Eva decided to return to the old house, not to apologize or explain anything, but to collect a few belongings she had left behind. She chose to go in the afternoon, when she knew her parents were usually busy with their own matters. The decision was made without emotional impulse. She simply wanted to settle one remaining issue so she could move forward without weight. The journey to the house felt different. The road she used to take almost every day now looked unfamiliar. There was no strong sense of longing, only the awareness that the place was no longer a safe space for her. Eva stopped in front of the house, stood there for a moment, then knocked softly. Her mother opened the door. Her face showed surprise, then turned stiff. There was no hug. No warm greeting. Eva stated her purpose briefly. She wanted to take some documents and clothes she had not been able to bring with her. Her mother nodded without much comment and led her inside. The house was still the same. The furniture had not changed. The scent of the rooms was familiar, but the atmosphere felt empty. Eva walked slowly, maintaining the emotional distance she had built since leaving. Her father appeared from the living room. His expression was flat. He did not ask where Eva had been all this time. He only asked whether she had found a place to stay. Eva answered briefly that everything was going well. That response seemed sufficient for him. There was no further conversation. Silence took over again. Eva went into her room. She opened the closet and took several important items. Identity documents, work papers, and a few sets of work clothes. She did not take objects with sentimental value. She realized she did not need the past in order to continue living. Every item she placed in her bag was chosen deliberately. When she came out of the room, her mother was standing near the door. There was hesitation on her face, as if she wanted to say something. However, the words never came. Her mother only told Eva to take care of herself. Eva nodded. She did not add anything. She knew that conversation would not bring change. Before Eva left, her father said that the decision they had made was for Eva's own good. He said it with confidence. Eva listened without reaction. She did not feel the need to argue. To her, doing good did not always mean understanding. She chose to accept the statement as a closing remark. Eva stepped outside with a bag that now felt heavier. The door closed behind her without a loud sound. No one followed. No one called her name. She walked away without looking back. This time, her departure felt final. On the way back, Eva felt a relief she had not expected. She realized she no longer had a reason to return. Everything she needed was with her. There were no unfinished matters, no ties that required explanation. She felt lighter, even though her responsibilities had increased. That afternoon, Eva returned to the guest house and began reorganizing her life more seriously. She looked for a more stable place to live. She contacted a few old acquaintances to ask about available rooms. She created a simple budget and recorded her expenses neatly. Everything was done without rushing, but with consistency. A few days later, Eva moved into a small rented room on the edge of the city. The place was not large, but it was enough for rest and work. She cleaned the room herself, arranged the basic furniture, and began building a new routine. Every morning she left for work early. Every night, she returned with a level of fatigue she could accept. Meanwhile, in the old house, Ava's absence began to feel real. Her mother noticed empty spaces that used to be filled by Ava's habits. There were no more footsteps in the morning. No more short messages about household needs. Her father started to realize that some small matters now had to be handled by himself. However, no one contacted Ava to talk about it. They still believed that Ava would return when things became difficult. They interpreted the distance as part of a learning process. No one realized that Ava was actually building a foundation she had never had before. In her rented room, Ava sat at the small table and opened her work records. She reviewed contracts, schedules, and income. She made sure everything was clearly documented. She was not thinking about proving anything. She only wanted her life to run in an orderly way. Each small decision gave her a sense of control that had long been missing. That night, Eva looked around her small space with a neutral feeling. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel defeated. She simply felt that she was standing in the right place for herself. She realized that the silence she had chosen was not a form of escape, but a way to protect herself from conversations that would never be fair. That day closed one phase of her life. Eva no longer carried the key to the old house. She no longer waited for validation. She stepped into the next day with more certain steps, leaving the past without drama, and choosing a life she was building on her own. Ava's days began to settle into a simple pattern. She woke up early, before the alarm went off, prepared herself calmly, and left for work without rushing. Her rented room was small but tidy. Every corner had a purpose. There were no unnecessary belongings. She deliberately kept her space clean so her mind would not feel crowded. At work, Eva took on extra hours as agreed. Her tasks did not change, but her responsibilities increased. She completed her work on time, did not seek attention, and did not refuse reasonable assignments. Her coworkers began to notice that Ava was dependable not because she talked a lot, but because her results were consistent. During breaks, Eva ate simply. She brought her own meals or bought inexpensive food around the office. She recorded her daily expenses carefully. This habit was not new, but it had become more important now. She wanted to know exactly how much she had and how much she could set aside. There was no room for impulsive decisions. Evenings followed the same routine. Eva returned home, cleaned her room, and prepared what she needed for the next day. She rarely turned on the television. She preferred reading or organizing her weekly plans. Her life felt quiet, but orderly. There were no voices questioning her choices. No unclear demands. Several weeks passed without major changes. Eva did not contact her parents. They also did not reach out much. Occasionally, there was a short message from her mother asking how she was. Eva replied as needed. She did not go into long explanations. She did not want to open discussions she was not ready to face. Meanwhile, the old house began to adjust. Her mother had to rearrange certain habits. Her father started handling small matters he had never paid attention to before. There was no major crisis, but there was an uneasiness that was hard to explain. They still believed Eva would return. That belief kept them from looking deeper. Eva decided to add skills that could support her work. She enrolled in an affordable short training program. Every night, she studied with focus. She did not feel burdened. Instead, she felt herself growing. Each new piece of knowledge gave her real confidence, not empty validation. One day, her supervisor called Eva in for a conversation. It was brief and to the point. Ava's performance was considered stable. There was a possibility of increased responsibility with better compensation. Eva listened calmly and expressed her willingness. There was no excessive reaction. She knew the opportunity came from effort, not luck. With her slightly increased income, Eva adjusted her budget. She began setting aside an emergency fund regularly. The amount was not large, but it was consistent. She also reorganized old records she had kept for years. Everything was neatly arranged, including routine transfers that had never been discussed. Eva did not see those records as a weapon. She viewed them as a life archive evidence of the choices she had made. She did not feel the need to show them to anyone. If they were ever needed, the facts would speak for themselves. On weekends, Eva visited the city park. She sat on a bench and observed people. There were families, couples, and people walking alone. The scene made her think about the meaning of home. She realized that home did not always mean returning to an old place. Sometimes, home meant finding a space that did not judge. The days that followed felt lighter. Eva began to smile softly as she went through her routine. Not because everything was easy, but because she knew where she was heading. She no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. She focused only on what was in front of her. One night, her phone rang. It was her father. Eva answered after a few seconds. The conversation was brief. He asked whether Eva was still staying in the same place and whether her job was going well. Eva answered honestly that everything was fine. There were no follow-up questions, no invitation to come home. The call ended with a formal closing. Eva put her phone down and continued what she was doing. She did not feel disappointed. She did not feel relieved either. She simply noted that the distance was still there. She chose not to interpret it further. That night, Eva realized one important thing. A simple life did not mean a narrow life. In that simplicity, she found control. She knew when to work, when to stop, and when to remain silent. She was no longer trapped in comparison. Several months after Eva began living on her own, her life settled into a steady rhythm. There were no major events that suddenly changed everything. The change came from small, consistent decisions. She worked, went home, rested, and repeated the same routine the next day. That routine created a sense of security she had never had before. One night, after finishing some extra work, Eva sat at the small desk in her room. She opened her laptop and began organizing old files. Not because she felt nostalgic, but because she wanted to make sure all her documents were properly stored. This had long been her habit, though in the past it was often interrupted by other people's needs. She opened a folder she rarely touched. Inside were old financial records. Eva read them slowly, making sure every detail was clearly recorded. Regular transfers, bill payments, and expenses that were never discussed. Everything was arranged chronologically. Nothing was fabricated. Nothing was exaggerated. Just numbers that reflected real decisions. Eva paused for a moment. She realized that most of those records were connected to her parents' house. Payments made quietly to keep things peaceful. Support she considered normal because she lived there. She never felt like she was making a sacrifice. She only felt responsible. At that moment, Eva felt no strong emotion. She was not angry. She was not proud either. She was simply looking at the facts honestly. She realized that she had chosen silence not out of fear, but because she did not want everything to turn into calculations. She believed that family relationships did not need to be recorded like reports. But now the situation was different. Eva no longer lived there. She was no longer part of that household's routine. These records were no longer just archives. They had become proof of a life journey that was never openly acknowledged. Eva closed her laptop and sat quietly for a while. She had no intention of showing those records to anyone. She did not want to use the past as a tool for justification. She only wanted to be sure that she was not mistaken about what she had done. In the days that followed, Eva became busier. Her responsibilities at work increased. She was trusted to handle several important tasks. She completed them with focus. Her supervisor began giving her more room to grow. There was no excessive praise, but there was clear trust. Meanwhile, in the old house, things slowly began to change. Bills arrived more frequently. Some payments felt heavier than usual. Her mother started checking the account more carefully. She felt that something was different, though she could not yet explain it. Her father began to notice that the monthly expenses were no longer balanced. They thought it was just a matter of adjustment. They had not connected it to Ava's departure. They still believed everything would return to normal with time. There were no deep discussions. No thorough evaluation. One afternoon, her mother opened some old records stored in a drawer. She wanted to double-check several past payments. While comparing the data, she noticed a pattern she had never paid attention to before. There were several payments that always came from the same source. The name felt familiar, but she did not immediately realize it. Her mother put the records away again. She was not ready to talk about it. She chose to wait. She did not want to draw conclusions too quickly. Her father also began checking the bank statements. He felt that something was missing, but he had not found the answer yet. Eva had no idea what was happening in the old house. She was not thinking about it. She focused on her own life. Every weekend, she reviewed her budget. She made sure her emergency fund stayed intact. She no longer covered expenses that were not her responsibility. One night, Eva received an email from the bank. It was a routine notification. She read it briefly and closed it. It did not disturb her. To her, finances were simply a part of life that needed to be managed calmly. She sat on her bed and thought about the future. She was not thinking about revenge. She was not waiting for recognition. She only wanted her life to move forward without unnecessary pressure. She felt content with what she had built. A few days later, her mother contacted Eva. The message was short and formal, asking about her well-being and her job. Eva replied politely. There was no further discussion. No follow-up questions. The conversation ended without clear direction. Eva looked at her phone for a moment, then put it down. She realized that the distance was still there. But she did not feel the need to fill that gap with explanations. She believed that the truth did not always need to be announced. That night, Eva opened her old records again. She made sure everything was safely stored. She deleted nothing. She added nothing. She simply kept them as part of her life journey. She turned off the light and lay down. There was no restlessness in her mind. She knew that one day, the facts would find their own way to surface. She did not need to push them. She only needed to keep moving forward, keep her life in order, and let time do the rest. Several weeks after Eva fully separated from the old house, changes began to become clear there. At first, they were small and easy to ignore. The electricity bill arrived with an amount that felt heavier than usual. The water payment no longer felt light. Her mother assumed it was simply due to the rising cost of living. Her father saw it as something normal that could be managed later. However, the following days did not become easier. Monthly expenses felt increasingly tight. There was no longer the flexibility they once had. At the end of each month, the remaining balance was always less than expected. Her mother began keeping more detailed records, trying to find which parts could be reduced. She cut back on shopping, postponed certain needs, and rearranged priorities. Her father started to notice the change. He was used to a stable household. Now, a sense of discomfort kept appearing. He did not blame anyone. He simply felt that something was missing from the balance that once felt normal. Amid all this busyness, Ava's name was rarely mentioned. They did not connect these difficulties to her departure. To them, Eva was simply an adult child who had finally learned to live on her own. They did not feel a financial loss, only that things had become tighter for no clear reason. Her mother began opening old records. She wanted to make sure no payments had been missed. As she compared month by month, she found consistent differences. Some bills that once felt manageable had now become a burden. She did not yet understand the cause, but a sense of unease began to grow. Her father felt the same. He tried to reorganize the family budget. He postponed certain plans and cut small expenses that usually went unnoticed, but it was not enough. There was a shortfall that could not be explained by savings alone. One night, they sat together without much conversation. The television was on, but no one was really watching. Her mother mentioned that expenses had felt different for some time. Her father nodded, agreeing without adding an explanation. They agreed to review all their financial records. The next day, her father opened stored bank statements. He checked old transactions one by one. At first, it was just to make sure there were no mistakes. But the longer he looked, the clearer it became that there was a pattern he had never noticed before. Several regular payments no longer appeared. Her mother looked as well. She pointed out several old transactions that were now missing. Certain installment payments, bills that used to be covered without effort. They looked at each other, trying to remember who usually handled those matters. There was no immediate answer. Her mother began to feel uncertain. She remembered Ava's habits that were rarely discussed. Ava often came home late. Ava rarely complained. Ava always made sure the household ran smoothly. The thought came slowly, without accusation, but it was enough to make her uneasy. Her father refused to draw quick conclusions. He was still convinced that Ava was not yet fully established. He believed this was simply a period of adjustment. But the data in front of him did not support that belief. The numbers spoke calmly yet clearly. Meanwhile, Ava continued her life without disruption. She focused on her work and maintained her routine. She did not know that the old house was beginning to feel the impact of her absence. She did not think about it. She believed that everyone was responsible for their own life. Over the weekend, Ava sat in her room and reviewed her short-term plans. She felt her life was stable, not easy, but manageable. She felt sufficient. She did not feel the need to contact her parents to explain anything. She believed that distance allowed everyone the space to think clearly. In the old house, conversations about finances began to happen more often. Her mother felt restless. She did not blame Eva, but she could not ignore the changes that had occurred since Eva left. Her father began considering reviewing older records, not just those from the past few months. One afternoon, her mother sat alone at the dining table and opened an old drawer. She found a folder containing documents that were rarely touched. Among them were old payment records that Eva had once kept. Her mother opened them hesitantly. As she read through them one by one, her breathing grew heavier. Several payments they had long assumed were settled had actually come from an account that was not theirs. The name appeared repeatedly, a name that was not unfamiliar. A name they had long believed did not contribute. Her mother closed the folder slowly. She did not speak to her husband right away. She needed time to process what she had seen. Guilt arose, mixed with confusion. She began to realize that Ava's silence might not have been a sign of inability, but a choice. That night, her father also looked at the documents. He said nothing for a long time. His face was tense. He reread them, making sure there was no misunderstanding. The numbers were consistent. There was no room for another interpretation. For the first time since Eva left, they felt something different from mere financial difficulty. They felt a real sense of loss. Not only about money, but about a role they had never acknowledged. Across the city, Eva ended her day calmly. She did not know that the cracks in the old house were beginning to widen. She only knew that her life was now moving according to her own choices. She turned off the light and rested, unaware that her silence was slowly revealing a truth that could no longer be hidden. That morning began with an unusual atmosphere in the old house. Eva's father sat at the dining table with a stack of documents spread out in front of him. Her mother stood near the kitchen, holding a cup that had already gone cold. There was no casual conversation as there usually was. They both knew that what lay before them was not just numbers, but fragments of decisions they had once considered insignificant. Ava's father opened the printed bank statements one by one. He compared them month by month with care. The pattern became clearer. There were regular payments that had once appeared without ever being questioned. Now those payments were gone. Not just one or two, but many of them. All of them stopped around the same time Eva left. Her mother sat down and looked along with him. She pointed to several transactions that had been consistent for years. Installment payments, monthly bills, even sudden expenses that had always seemed to be handled on time. They both fell silent. There was no longer any room for denial. Ava's father took a long breath. He realized that he had never truly checked where those funds came from. He had simply accepted that everything was taken care of. He did not ask. He did not look deeper. Now that habit had turned into a quiet but heavy regret. Her mother began to recall Ava's habits. Coming home late without complaint, refusing help, rarely asking for anything. Everything that once seemed ordinary now felt different. She realized that Eva had chosen silence not because she was incapable, but because she did not want to burden conversations with explanations that were never asked for. Ava's father opened another file. There, the same sender's name appeared again and again, consistent and unmistakable. The name was Eva Harper. No initials, no intermediaries. The fact stood on its own. Ava's father stared at the name for a long time, as if hoping there was a mistake. But the longer he looked, the more undeniable the truth became. Her mother covered her face with both hands. She did not cry loudly, she simply sat still. Guilt surfaced slowly. She remembered Ava's birthday morning, when they asked Ava to leave without giving her any space to explain. She realized that Ava's silence that day was not a sign of defeat, but a decision not to prolong something that had already been decided unilaterally. The conversation between them was brief and heavy. There was no blaming each other. They both understood that they had formed conclusions without complete information. Ava's father admitted that he had been too confident in his own judgment. Her mother admitted that she had chosen to believe without asking. The day passed in an awkward atmosphere. They tried to continue their routine, but their thoughts remained with those documents. Every activity felt slower. Every small decision felt heavier because they knew that all this time someone had been carrying more than they had realized. Meanwhile, Ava went through her day as usual. She left for work early, completed her tasks with focus, and returned home in the evening. She received no news from her parents. She was not waiting for any. Her life moved in a rhythm she knew and controlled. In the old house, Ava's father finally decided to contact the bank. He wanted to be sure that the data he was seeing was correct. The bank officer explained calmly and professionally. All the transactions were valid. All of them were made from an account under Ava's name. There were no recording errors. After the call ended, Ava's father sat back down. His face looked older than before. He realized that he had measured maturity by outward behavior, not by real responsibility. He thought Eva was not independent because she did not talk much. He had not understood that silence could be the quietest form of responsibility. Her mother stood and walked into Ava's now empty room. She opened the wardrobe that was almost bare. A few hangers were still there. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the room for a long time. She remembered all the small moments she had never paid attention to. She felt a sense of loss, not because Eva had left, but because she had never truly seen Evia. That night, Ava's father wrote a short message. He did not know what to say. He wrote and deleted it several times. In the end, he sent a simple line, asking how Eva was and whether she had time to talk. The message was sent without demands, without a commanding tone. Eva received the message while she was getting ready for bed. She read it once. She did not reply immediately. She set her phone down and sat quietly for a few minutes. She did not feel satisfied. She also did not feel the urge to explain. She knew this conversation would be different from the ones before. A short while later, Eva replied briefly. She said she was doing well and was busy with work. Nothing more. No follow-up questions. She closed the conversation politely. Ava's father read the reply with mixed feelings. He realized that the distance that had formed could not be closed with a single message. He also knew that the truth he had just understood could not instantly erase the decisions that had already been made. That night, two worlds moved forward in different silences. Eva ended her day with the calm she had built on her own. In the old house, her parents sat with the documents still open, realizing that the numbers on the pages had revealed something they could no longer ignore. The following days moved forward with a rhythm that felt awkward for Ava's parents. The house that once felt stable was now filled with pauses. Every corner reminded them of old habits they had never questioned. Ava's father began to pay attention to expenses in a way he never had before. He recorded, calculated, and compared. Her mother did the same. They realized how fragile the balance was that they had once believed was certain. Some bills were delayed. Not enough to cause a major crisis, but enough to force adjustments in their lifestyle. Small things that had once been easy now required consideration. They reduced spending, postponed plans, and talked about money more often. Those conversations always ended at the same conclusion, even though it was never spoken aloud. Eva had once been there, supporting everything without a word. Ava's father tried to contact Ava again, this time with a longer message. He admitted that he had seen the bank records and realized Ava's role all along. He wrote carefully, trying not to sound commanding or demanding. He said he was sorry and wanted to meet if Ava was willing. The message was sent in the afternoon. Eva read it during her work break. She read it slowly, then put her phone away. She did not feel angry. She did not feel the urge to argue. She only felt a clear distance between the past and the life she was building now. She needed time to respond, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to be honest with herself. At the office, Eva completed her work with focus. She had gained her supervisor's trust. Her responsibilities increased, along with the clarity of her direction in life. She no longer lived under the shadow of other people's judgments. She set her own priorities and carried them out without unnecessary explanations. That night, Eva replied to her father's message. She wrote in a calm tone. She said that she understood what had happened and appreciated his honesty. She also stated that she was not ready to meet in the near future. She needed space to maintain her own balance. She ended the message politely and clearly. Ava's father read the reply several times. He wanted to respond quickly but held himself back. He realized that pushing would only widen the distance. He began to understand that Ava's silence was not meant to hurt, but to protect herself. Her mother heard about the message and fell silent for a long time. She felt guilty, but she also began to accept that guilt did not automatically grant the right to ask for Ava's presence again. She wrote a separate message to Eva, shorter and more personal. She apologized without adding explanations. She did not mention money. She simply admitted that she had judged wrongly. Eva read her mother's message carefully. She felt the sincerity in it. She replied briefly, thanked her, and said she hoped her mother was doing well. She did not open a new conversation. She maintained the boundary she had set. Time continued to move forward. Ava's parents began to adapt to the new situation. They learned to manage without relying on support that was no longer there. The process was not easy, but slowly they found a new rhythm. Every adjustment reminded them of the choices they had once made. On the other side, Eva became more settled in her life. She moved to a more comfortable place to live. She built a routine that was simple and effective. She spent her weekends on things that gave her peace. She did not avoid the past, but she also did not allow it to disrupt the present. One day, Eva received news from a relative. The message was simple, but enough to confirm that her parents were trying to improve their situation. Eva read it without excessive emotion. She felt relieved knowing they were doing fine, but she did not feel the need to be more involved. That night, Eva sat in her apartment and closed the day with a brief reflection. She realized that the freedom she felt did not come from other people's recognition. That freedom was born from the decision to stop explaining herself to those who were unwilling to listen. In the old house, Ava's father and mother sat together without much conversation. They no longer spoke of Ava in a judgmental tone. They said her name carefully, as if realizing that trust is something that can disappear without a sound. Time continued to move forward without offering any pause. Eva became more immersed in the routine she had built on her own. Her career progressed steadily. She was trusted to handle larger projects and began to be included in decision-making. Each day felt full but directed. She no longer felt drained by emotional pressure. Her energy was spent on things with clear outcomes. One morning, Eva received an official invitation from her office. It was for an internal leadership training program, offered only to a small number of selected employees. She read the invitation carefully. There was no excessive surprise. She simply felt recognized for consistent work. She accepted the invitation and adjusted her schedule. Despite her busy days, Eva kept her life simple. She managed her finances with discipline. Every expense was recorded. Every source of income was allocated according to its purpose. She no longer felt anxious when checking her bank statements. Everything was under her control. There were no hidden obligations. There were no burdens she had not chosen herself. At her parents' house, the atmosphere slowly changed. They began to speak more openly about past mistakes. Not to blame each other, but to understand how things had reached that point. Ava's father admitted that he had spent too long measuring success from a narrow perspective. Her mother admitted that she often looked away for the sake of temporary comfort. They started to reorganize their habits. Spending was reduced. Priorities were clarified. They no longer relied on support whose source they did not understand. Every decision was made with careful consideration. The process was exhausting, but eye-opening. Eva was not directly involved in those changes. She heard enough updates through relatives. She did not offer advice. She did not criticize. She believed that everyone needed to experience consequences in order to truly learn. She chose to maintain a healthy distance. One afternoon, Eva received a call from her father. The call was not sudden. He asked whether she had time to talk. Eva responded calmly and said she could listen for a moment. The conversation was brief and controlled. Her father said that they were trying to fix things without asking for help. He only wanted Eva to know that they were taking responsibility for their own lives. Eva listened without interrupting. She respected the honesty. She replied that she was glad to hear it and hoped they were healthy. She did not offer anything. She also did not remove the boundaries she had set. The call ended on a more mature note than before. After that, Eva felt relieved. Not because everything was resolved, but because the direction of the conversation had changed. There were no hidden demands. There was no emotional manipulation, only honest and brief communication. At work, Eva began to show a calm leadership style. She did not speak much, but her guidance was clear. Her colleagues respected her for consistency, not volume. Her supervisors noticed this and gave positive feedback. Eva accepted input without defensiveness. She continued to learn. At night, Eva often ended her day by reading or taking a short walk. She no longer spent time thinking about what should have happened. She focused on what she was living now. Her life was not perfect, but it was stable. She felt sufficient. On the other side, her parents began to feel the impact of their change in attitude. Their relationships with relatives improved. They no longer felt the need to maintain an image. They learned to apologize without conditions. The process made them more humble. Several months later, Eva received news that the old house was undergoing minor renovations. Not for style, but for long-delayed repairs. She gave a faint smile when she read the message. She did not feel the need to visit. She simply hoped the work went smoothly. Eva realized that the chapter of her life had shifted. She was no longer in a position of proving herself. She was in a phase of quietly building her future. She did not cut ties, but she also did not return to old patterns. The seasons changed almost unnoticed, and Ava's life entered a calmer phase. She no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. Her days were filled with work that had clear direction and life choices she made consciously. Every decision felt lighter, no longer weighed down by the demands of the past. At the office, Ava had become a point of reference for some newer colleagues. They came to her not because she was the most vocal, but because she was known to be organized, consistent, and free of unnecessary drama. She helped when needed, gave brief guidance, and then let others learn from their own process. She did not feel the need to control everything. One day, her manager called Eva in for a conversation. It was casual and unpressured. The manager explained that a team restructuring would be happening soon. Several new positions would open, including one with greater responsibility. Eva was not given an offer directly, but she was asked to be prepared if the opportunity arose. Eva nodded and listened. She showed no excessive enthusiasm. She also did not downplay the possibility. She simply noted the information and returned to work. To her, opportunities did not need to be chased in panic. If they were right, they would come on their own. Outside of work, Eva began to expand her social circle naturally. She met a few people through simple activities. No connections were forced. She spoke honestly and maintained healthy boundaries. Past experiences had taught her that closeness without limits often led to emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, Eva's parents were slowly facing a deeper reality. They were no longer preoccupied with adjusting numbers in their bank accounts, but began re-examining how they had treated their own child. This awareness did not come from a single major event, but from an accumulation of small moments. Her mother started recalling times when Eva offered help without being asked. She remembered how Eva often came home late and still made sure the household ran smoothly. Back then, it had all seemed normal. Now those memories felt heavy, not only because of guilt, but because of regret that could not be undone. Her father experienced something similar. He realized that he had been too focused on an idealized image of independence without truly seeing the real effort right in front of him. He judged by visible outcomes, not by contributions that were never announced. That mistake now felt unmistakably clear. They spoke about Eva several times without emotional outbursts. There was no longer a tone of blame. Her name was mentioned carefully. They began to understand that broken relationships could not always be repaired by good intentions alone. Time was required and distance had to be respected. Eva heard about her parents' change in attitude through close relatives. She listened calmly. She did not feel satisfied. She also did not feel the urge to move closer right away. She simply noted that a process was underway, even though it was not under her control. One evening, Eva sat alone in her living room. She reviewed her plans for the next few years. There were no grand or dramatic ambitions. She simply wanted stability, growth, and to remain in control of her own choices. She felt content with realistic goals. She realized that old wounds had not completely disappeared, but they no longer controlled her actions. She could remember without drowning. She could understand without justifying. She could move forward without carrying other people's burdens. A few days later, her mother sent a message that felt different from usual. There were no requests. No detailed revisiting of the past. The message simply expressed a hope that Eva would always be healthy and happy. Eva read it several times. She replied with a simple thank you. The conversation ended there. There was no continuation. Yet to Evie, that message felt more sincere than a long apology that arrived too late. She appreciated the change in tone, even though she was not ready to reopen a door that had once been closed. That night in bed, Eva reflected on her life's journey. She did not see herself as a victim. She did not see herself as a hero either. She was simply someone who had learned to choose herself after spending too long placing herself last. That day arrived without any special sign. There was no calendar reminder, no sudden message that shifted the mood. Eva went through her morning as usual. She woke up early, prepared a simple breakfast, and got ready for work. Her life was already on a stable path, and she felt comfortable with that rhythm. At the office, Eva completed her tasks calmly. She attended a brief meeting and offered input where necessary. Several of her suggestions were accepted without long debate. It was proof that her presence was now valued not because of her past, but because of her current abilities. Eva noticed the change, but she did not use it as a measure of her self-worth. Around midday, her manager called Eva in again. This time the conversation was more serious. She was offered a new role with greater responsibility. There was no pressure to respond immediately. Eva was given time to consider it. She thanked her manager, and said she would give an answer after thinking it through carefully. When the workday ended, Eva went home without rushing. She walked for a while before taking public transportation. The afternoon air felt light. She did not feel chased by anything. In her apartment, Eva sat down and opened her personal journal. She wrote about the things she was grateful for and the plans she wanted to pursue going forward. She wrote honestly, without adjusting her thoughts to meet anyone else's expectations. That evening, Eva received a message from her father. It was brief and different from previous ones. He said that they understood Eva's decision to keep her distance. He did not ask to meet. He did not ask for help. He simply wanted to say that they were proud to see Eva standing on her own. The message ended without anything more. Eva read the message slowly. She did not reply right away. She set her phone down and sat quietly. For the first time, she felt that those words carried no burden. There were no demands behind them. No hidden expectations. Just a statement that came late, but honestly. After a moment, Eva replied briefly. She thanked him and said she hoped they were healthy. She did not open a new topic. She did not suggest meeting. She maintained the boundaries she had built with care. The reply felt sufficient. At her parents' house, Eva's father and mother read the reply together. They were not disappointed. They understood that closeness could not be forced. They also realized that a change in attitude did not guarantee the restoration of a relationship. For the first time, they accepted the situation without self-defense. The following days passed quietly. Eva decided to accept the new role at work. She made the decision because she felt ready, not because she wanted to prove anything. She reorganized her schedule and adjusted her pace of life. The challenges increased, but she faced them calmly. Eva began to realize that her life was no longer shaped by judgments from the past. She no longer waited for recognition to feel complete. She also did not reject the past with anger. She placed it as part of a journey that has shaped the way she thought today. One weekend, Eva visited a small cafe alone. She brought a book and sat in a quiet corner. She enjoyed the time without interruption. She realized that being alone no longer felt lonely. She felt whole with herself. Elsewhere, her parents continued their lives in a simpler way. They no longer spoke about Eva with excessive regret. They mentioned her name with respect. They learned that loving someone did not always mean possessing or controlling them. This story did not end with a grand embrace or an emotional reunion. There was no dramatic scene to close it all. What remained were people who learned to accept their roles with maturity. Eva continued her life with steady steps. She carried the lessons without carrying the wounds. She chose the future without looking back for justification. The silence that was once mistaken for weakness had become proof of strength. At the end of this journey, no one was entirely right or entirely wrong. There were only decisions, consequences, and growth. Eva found her freedom not because the world changed, but because she chose to stand tall and move forward without waiting for anyone's permission.